Hey there, welcome back. Today, we're taking a deep dive into something I think you'll find really fascinating, the concept of mastery. You shared some excerpts from a book about it, and I have to say it's really sparked my curiosity. We're going to unpack the key principles, but what I'm really excited about are the historical examples and surprising stories that the book uses to bring these ideas to life.
It's a rich text, definitely. And it goes beyond just defining skill. It really dives into the transformation someone undergoes on their journey to mastery. Not just their abilities, but also how they see the world and even how their character changes.
I was struck by that too, this idea that mastery is about so much more than just being good at something. It's almost like an evolution of the self. And what really caught my attention was the book's emphasis on our brains being wired for this. It's not some elite pursuit, it's something we're all capable of. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a powerful statement, isn't it? The book argues that everyone has a seed of uniqueness with the potential to develop into mastery. It made me think about how often we dismiss our own potential, thinking, oh, that's not for me, I'm not a genius. This book challenges that notion.
That's so true. We often put limitations on ourselves.
Yeah.
So how do we even begin to tap into that potential? Where does this journey to mastery begin?
Well, the book breaks it down into three distinct stages. The first being finding your life's task.
I love that phrase, life's task. It sounds so grand and almost destined. But I imagine this isn't always a clear-cut path, right?
Absolutely. The book acknowledges that for many, this is a process of discovery, and that's where the stories come in. Take Leonardo da Vinci, for example.
Da Vinci, painter, inventor, the ultimate Renaissance man. We all know him for his incredible range of talents. What's the book's take on his path?
What I found fascinating is how the author connects da Vinci's multifaceted genius back to his childhood. He was apparently obsessed with nature, spending hours drawing irises, captivated by their intricate details. It makes you wonder if those early explorations of the natural world actually laid the groundwork for his later achievements in art, science, and engineering.
That's a really interesting connection. It makes me think about my own childhood fascinations. What were those little sparks of interest that maybe I should revisit with a fresh perspective?
It's certainly food for thought, isn't it? Maybe those seemingly random passions from our younger years hold more significance than we realize.
So let's say we've unearthed those seeds of interest, those hints of our life's task. What's the next step on this journey to mastery?
The book calls this stage the apprenticeship, and I have to say this section resonated with me the most. It's not just about learning skills from a master fill. It's about this intense immersion in a field, shedding any naivete or preconceived notions. The author uses the term submitting to reality, which initially struck me as a bit harsh, but I think what he's getting at is that it takes a certain level of humility and surrender to truly master something.
Submitting to reality. I'm trying to wrap my head around that. It sounds like there's an element of letting go of ego involved here.
I think you're right. The book uses Charles Darwin as an example. Here's a guy who hated traditional schooling, loved nature, and ended up on the Beagle voyage almost by chance.
So even Darwin, the father of evolutionary theory, kind of stumbled into his life's work. I find that so relatable. I think a lot of us feel like we're figuring things out as we go along.
It's a comforting thought, isn't it? But the point the author emphasizes is that even though Darwin's path wasn't linear, he was persistent in pursuing his interests. And when the opportunity arose, he was prepared to seize it. And that ties into another crucial aspect of the apprenticeship, finding the right mentor.
Mentorship's so important. But isn't finding a good mentor often a matter of luck?
There's definitely an element of chance involved. But as Louis Pasteur said, chance favors the prepared mind. The book uses Michael Faraday's story to illustrate this. Remember him, the brilliant chemist and physicist?
Vaguely. Refresh my memory what makes Faraday's story so compelling in the context of mastery.
Well, picture this. Faraday starts as a bookbinder's apprentice, right? But he's totally obsessed with science, devouring every book he can get his hands on. Then, through a stroke of luck, he gets to attend lectures by the famous chemist Humphrey Davy. That access to knowledge, combined with Faraday's own insatiable curiosity, leads him to work for Davy, and eventually he surpasses even his mentor's accomplishments in the field. It really highlights how a good mentor can open doors and accelerate someone's path to mastery.
That's an amazing story. It really underscores the power of mentorship and also the importance of being prepared to make the most of those opportunities when they arise. Okay, so we've found our life's task apprenticed under a master. What comes next on this journey?
This next stage is where things really get interesting. It's what the book calls the creative active phase, where all that focused effort and learning start to blossom into true mastery.
Okay, I'm picturing a flower bursting into bloom here. This is where all that hard work starts to pay off, right?
Exactly. And the book highlights a fascinating figure for this stage, Mozart. Not just the child prodigy Mozart, but Mozart, the rebellious composer, the one who pushed boundaries and redefined what was possible in music.
That's a side of Mozart I hadn't really considered before. I tend to think of him as this classical icon, a symbol of pure genius.
He was undoubtedly a genius, but what the book emphasizes is that even Mozart went through a period of challenging conventions, of really grappling with the rules before he could transcend them. And the author argues that it's in that space, that discomfort of pushing beyond what's familiar, where true creative breakthroughs often happen. He even talks about the nervous sensual energy that you can feel in the music of Don Giovanni, one of Mozart's most revolutionary operas.
That's fascinating. So even for Mozart, mastery wasn't just about effortless talent. It was about pushing through creative struggles and embracing that tension. That's actually really encouraging to hear.
It is, and this is where the book introduces the concept of the dimensional mind. It's not simply about accumulating knowledge, but about developing a mind that's flexible, that can make connections and see patterns that others might miss. It's about depth of knowledge and the ability to use it in innovative ways.
Dimensional mind. I love that. It's like our brains become these multifaceted landscapes capable of exploring all these different dimensions of a subject. But is there anything we can do to actively cultivate that kind of thinking?
There are, and I think you'll find some of the book's suggestions quite surprising. One that stood out to me is the idea of negative capability. It sounds a bit counterintuitive, but it's about being comfortable with not knowing, suspending judgment, and embracing uncertainty.
That does go against everything we're taught in school, doesn't it? We're conditioned to seek the right answer, to avoid being wrong.
Exactly. But the book argues that it's in that space of not knowing, of being open to multiple possibilities, that true creativity can emerge. It's like loosening the grip of our preconceived notions and allowing new ideas to flow in.
That's such an important point. It makes me think about how often I shut down possibilities before I even explored them, simply because they don't fit my existing framework.
It's something we all do, this tendency to filter information through our existing biases. Another strategy the book suggests is using analogies, finding connections between seemingly unrelated
Oh,
things.
I love that. It reminds me of how some of the greatest inventions were inspired by nature, like the structure of a bridge inspired by a spider web. It's like looking at the world through a different lens, finding inspiration in unexpected places.
Precisely. It's about training our minds to see those connections, to be open to unexpected sources of inspiration.
Okay, so we've explored the three main stages of mastery, but I have a feeling there's more to this than just individual skill development, right?
Yeah.
There's this whole social aspect to consider.
You're right. The book dedicates a significant portion to mastering social intelligence, something that's often overlooked but absolutely crucial on the path to mastery.
I bet this is where Benjamin Franklin comes in. He was such a master of social dynamics, wasn't he? I'm curious to hear what the book reveals about his approach.
It's fascinating stuff. The book recounts some of his youthful pranks, like the silent do-good letters he wrote, basically manipulating his peers through this anonymous persona. And then there are his interactions with his employer, Samuel Keimer, where he uses his understanding of human nature to navigate tricky social situations. It's like he was studying social dynamics as a game.
It sounds like he was almost a social scientist, observing and experimenting with human behavior. But why is social intelligence so crucial for achieving mastery?
Because the reality is, no matter how brilliant you are, you're going to be interacting with other people. Understanding their motivations, navigating social dynamics, and even leveraging social forces to your advantage, these are all essential skills for success in any field.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection. But the world can be a pretty complex and challenging social landscape. What specific advice does the book offer for navigating these complexities?
This is where the book takes a somewhat darker turn, introducing what it calls the 7 deadly realities. It's not the most uplifting topic, but it's a necessary one to grapple with.
7 deadly realities. That sounds a bit ominous. I'm definitely intrigued, but also a bit apprehensive. What am I talking about here?
The book is essentially addressing the less savory aspects of human nature that you're likely to encounter on your path to mastery. These are the forces that can hold you back, sabotage your efforts, or even derail your entire journey if you're not prepared for them.
Okay, now I'm really curious and maybe a little worried, but I'm ready to face these realities head on. Let's dive in. Which one comes first on this list of social pitfalls?
The first, and perhaps most pervasive, is envy. The book argues that it's almost hardwired into us to compare ourselves to others, and this can easily lead to envy.
It's so true. Social media certainly amplifies this tendency, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone's curating their perfect lives online, which makes it even easier to fall into the comparison trap.
Absolutely. And while a little bit of envy can be motivating, the book warns that for some people it can become this toxic force that drives them to undermine others. It can be really destructive.
So how do we protect ourselves from these envious types? And more importantly, how do we avoid becoming those people ourselves?
That's a great question. The book offers a few subtle clues to look for. People who are excessively effusive in their praise or who try to get too close too fast, those can be red flags. It's like they're trying to disarm you with niceness before they strike.
That's a chilling thought. It makes you wonder about people's true motivations sometimes.
It's a reminder to be discerning in our relationships. The book also suggests that people with deep insecurities are more prone to envy. So it's about being aware of those dynamics and as much as possible avoiding triggering those feelings in others.
It's a delicate dance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Trying to navigate those social complexities.
hmm
Okay, what's the next deadly reality we need to be aware of?
This one's especially relevant in work environments. Conformism. It's that pressure to fit in, to go along with the crowd, even when you know there might be a better way.
Oh, I've definitely felt that pressure. It can be so tempting to just blend in, especially when you're starting out in a new field.
The book argues that groups, even those that claim to be open-minded and innovative, often reject people who are too different. It's like a built-in defense mechanism to maintain the status quo.
So how do we balance our need to express our individuality, to bring our unique perspective to the table with the realities of navigating these social dynamics? It feels like a tightrope walk sometimes.
It is, and the book emphasizes the need for strategy. It's about letting your work speak for itself, allowing your unique spirit to shine through your creations. But when it comes to the social game, it might be wise to choose your battles carefully, especially early in your career.
So pick your moments to rebel. Let your work speak for itself, but don't rock the boat too much too soon. It's a subtle dance for sure.
It is, and that brings us to the next deadly reality: rigidity. This is about people clinging to their opinions and beliefs like life rafts, even when evidence suggests they might be outdated or incorrect.
Oh, I know those types. It's like they're terrified of being wrong or changing their minds. It can be so frustrating trying to have a productive conversation with someone who's stuck in their ways.
The book points out that this rigidity is often rooted in fear and insecurity. It can be easier to hold on to a familiar, even if outdated idea than to risk being wrong or vulnerable.
It makes me think of those experts who refuse to acknowledge new research that contradicts their pet theories. They'd rather cling to their outdated models and admit they might be wrong.
Exactly, and this applies to all sorts of fields. The book argues that true mastery requires a willingness to adapt, to let go of outdated beliefs, and to constantly be learning and evolving. It's about embracing the unknown and being open to new information, even if it challenges our existing paradigms.
It's like that famous quote, "The only constant is change."
Precisely. So, how do we avoid becoming rigid in our thinking, especially as we gain expertise in a particular field? One strategy the book suggests is cultivating negative capability, that ability to hold multiple perspectives at once without forcing a resolution or needing to be right.
So it's about being okay with ambiguity and complexity, acknowledging that there might not always be one definitive answer.
Exactly. It's about training our minds to be more flexible and adaptable.
This is challenging stuff. It's like we're constantly battling our own ingrained tendencies. Okay, what's the next deadly reality on this list?
This one might hit a little close to home for all of us: self-absorbedness. The book reminds us that people are by and large mostly concerned with their own problems and perspectives. And guess what? You are too.
Touche. I think we all have moments where we get caught up in our own little worlds. It's human nature, isn't it?
It is. But the book emphasizes the importance of being aware of this tendency, because if we're not careful, we can end up projecting our own needs and desires onto others, which leads to all sorts of misunderstandings and conflicts.
It's like we're seeing the world through a distorted lens, filtered through our own personal biases and preoccupations.
Precisely. And that's why developing social intelligence is so crucial. It's about learning to step outside of our own self-absorption and truly see people as they are with their own unique perspectives and motivations.
Okay, so how do we break free from this self-absorbed bubble? How do we cultivate a more objective and empathetic view of the world and the people in it?
It's a continual process for sure, but the book offers some helpful strategies.
Hmm.
One is practicing deep listening, really focusing on what the other person is saying without interrupting or immediately jumping in with our own opinions.
So resisting that urge to make everything about ourselves, to truly hear what the other person is communicating without
Diagram.
filtering it through our own self-centered lens.
Exactly. Another strategy is cultivating empathy, actively trying to see the world from the other person's perspective. Even if we don't agree with them, we can try to understand their motivations, their fears, their aspirations.
That makes a lot of sense. But honestly, empathy can be tough, especially when you're dealing with someone you don't particularly like or respect.
It's true, but the book argues that even if we don't condone someone's actions, we can still try to understand where they're coming from. It's about gathering information and using it strategically, not to manipulate, but to navigate social complexities more effectively.
So social intelligence is kind of like playing a game of chess, where you're trying to anticipate your opponent's next move and plan your strategy accordingly. But instead of trying to defeat your opponent, you're trying to find a way to coexist and maybe even collaborate.
That's a great analogy. It's about being aware of the dynamics at play, understanding people's motivations, and finding ways to interact in a way that benefits everyone involved.
Okay, we've tackled 4 deadly realities so far. Envy, conformism, rigidity, and self-absorbedness. What are the last 3 we need to be on the lookout for?
The final three on the list are laziness, flightiness, and passive aggression.
Oh boy. I know people who embody each of those, and I'm sure I've exhibited some of those tendencies myself at times.
We've all been there for sure. The book's point is that these aren't just personality quirks. They're powerful forces that can derail our progress, especially when we're striving for mastery.
Okay, let's tackle laziness first. We all have those days where motivation wanes, and it's tempting to take the easy way out. How do we combat this inherent human tendency to seek comfort and avoid exertion?
Well, the book suggests that the first step is recognizing that laziness is a formidable opponent. It's not just about willpower or discipline. It's almost like a primal instinct to conserve energy. We're wired for efficiency, and sometimes that means taking the path of least resistance.
So it's like we're fighting against our evolutionary programming.
In a way, yes. And that's why it takes a conscious effort to overcome it. The book suggests finding ways to make our work intrinsically rewarding, tapping into that internal drive that keeps us going even when the going gets tough.
So finding a way to align our passions with our professions so that work doesn't feel like a chore, but rather a source of fulfillment.
That's the ideal, certainly. The book also suggests setting realistic goals, breaking down large tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks, and finding ways to hold ourselves accountable.
Those are all great tips, but honestly, some days it feels like just getting out of bed is a major accomplishment. Okay, let's move on to flightiness. How do we deal with those people who are constantly changing their minds or flitting from one thing to the next without ever really committing?
This is a tough one. The book offers some insights into the psychology of flightiness, suggesting that it's often driven by fear and insecurity. People who are flighty may be afraid of commitment of failure or even of success. It can be a way of avoiding those potentially painful experiences.
That's an interesting perspective. It's like they're always trying to stay one step ahead of discomfort or responsibility, never fully engaging with anything.
Exactly, and that can make them really challenging to work with. The book's advice is to establish clear expectations and boundaries right from the start.
So setting the ground rules and not letting them get away with flaky behavior, it's like creating a container for them to operate within, so they don't just float off into the ether.
Exactly. The book also emphasizes being patient and understanding, but also firm. We don't want to enable their flightiness, but we also don't want to be too harsh or judgmental.
It's all about finding that balance, isn't it?
Mm.
Supporting their growth while also holding them accountable. Okay, we're down to the last. Deadly reality, passive aggression. This is a tricky one because it's often so subtle and disguised. How does the book address this?
Passive aggression can be incredibly frustrating because it often masquerades as politeness or helpfulness. But beneath that surface, there's a lot of unexpressed anger and resentment brewing.
Ugh, yes. I've definitely encountered those types who are all smiles to your face but then undermine you behind your back. It's like they're waging this covert war and you're not even sure what you did to deserve it.
It can be incredibly disarming. The book's advice is to be aware of the signs, people who constantly evade responsibility, who make you feel guilty without directly confronting you, or who seem to accidentally mess things up.
So reading between the lines and paying attention to those subtle cues, it's almost like developing a sixth sense for passive-aggressive behavior.
It's about honing our social perception, for sure. And if you find yourself dealing with a passive-aggressive person, the book recommends being direct and assertive. Don't let them manipulate you or control the situation.
So call them out on their behavior, but do it calmly and professionally. It's about maintaining your boundaries without escalating the conflict.
Exactly. It's about addressing the behavior directly, but in a way that doesn't feed into their passive-aggressive tactics.
Okay, we've explored all 7 deadly realities.
Oh.
That was intense. What's the key takeaway here? How do we use this knowledge to navigate the social landscape more effectively?
The book's ultimate message is that mastering social intelligence is just as crucial as mastering our craft. It's about understanding human nature, being aware of the social dynamics at play, and using that knowledge to protect ourselves, build stronger relationships, and ultimately achieve our goals.
It's like having this secret weapon in our arsenal, a toolkit for navigating the complexities of the human world. But it's not about being manipulative or ruthless. It's about using this understanding for good to create more harmonious and productive interactions.
Precisely. It's about leveraging our social intelligence to create win-win situations, to build bridges instead of burning them.
Okay, we've covered the importance of finding our life's task, the stages of apprenticeship, the creative active phase, and now mastering social intelligence. Is there anything else the book explores on this journey to mastery?
There is. The book goes on to delve into the fascinating realm of higher level intuition, how we can cultivate that deeper knowing that comes from years of experience and deep immersion in a field. But perhaps we should save that exploration for part 3 of our deep dive.
I agree. This is already a lot to process. We'll be right back after a short break to explore higher-level intuition, the power of the unconscious mind, and some specific strategies you can use to further your own journey to mastery. Stay with us. Welcome back. I don't know about you, but my brain is buzzing after that deep dive into the 7 deadly realities. Phew! Who knew social intelligence was so crucial on the path to mastery?
It is fascinating, isn't it? And often overlooked. But yeah, as we've seen, understanding those social dynamics is key to navigating the complexities of the human world.
Absolutely. But now I'm really excited to explore the next stage of this journey. Higher level intuition is something the book touches on that I'm dying to unpack further. What's the book's take on how we cultivate this kind of intuition?
Well, the book dispels this myth that intuition is some mystical power only a select few possess, like it's this magical gift. No, it argues that higher level intuition is actually the result of intense immersion in a field, years of practice, and a deep understanding of the subject matter.
So it's not about having some magical sixth sense. It's about developing a deep, almost instinctive understanding through dedicated effort.
Exactly. Think of it this way. Every time we learn something new, our brain forms new connections. The more we learn, the more complex that network becomes. The book even uses the analogy of our brains becoming like intricate ecosystems, mirroring the complexity of the world we've been studying.
That's such a powerful image.
Yeah.
So it's like our brains are constantly evolving and adapting as we learn and grow. The more we push ourselves, the more intricate and sophisticated our mental models become.
Precisely. And that complexity is what allows for higher level intuition. Our brains are making lightning fast connections based on years of accumulated knowledge and experience. It's like we've built this incredible mental library, and we can instantly access information and insights that would have taken hours to process consciously.
That's so encouraging. It means that this kind of intuition isn't some innate talent. It's something we can develop through deliberate practice and dedication. It gives me hope that even though I might not be a natural genius, I can still achieve a level of mastery in my chosen field.
Absolutely. And the book goes on to offer some specific strategies to help us cultivate this intuitive power.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some of the techniques we can use to tap into this deeper level of knowing?
One that resonated with me is the importance of deep observation. The book uses this beautiful analogy of a Proustian spider feeling every vibration on its web. It's about being hyper-aware of your environment, noticing even the smallest details, and paying attention to those subtle cues that others might miss.
It was about cultivating a sense of mindfulness, being fully present in the moment, and absorbing information from all our senses. It makes me think of Sherlock Holmes noticing those tiny details that everyone else overlooks.
Exactly. It's about training our minds to be more perceptive, to see the world with fresh eyes. Another strategy the book emphasizes is resistance practice. This one might sound a bit daunting, but it's about leaning into discomfort, pushing past our limits, and becoming our own toughest critics.
Okay, I can see how that might be uncomfortable. But I get the idea. It's about constantly challenging ourselves, not settling for mediocrity, and always striving to improve. It's like that saying, no pain, no gain.
It is. But it's not about being masochistic or punishing ourselves. It's about embracing those moments of creative tension, those times when we're pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zone and expanding our capabilities.
The book also mentions something called fingertip feel. What's that all about?
Ah, fingertip feel. It's a beautiful way of describing that deep embodied knowledge that comes from long practice. It's that point where a skill becomes so ingrained that it's almost second nature. It's like a musician who can play an instrument without even thinking about it. Their fingers just know where to go. Or a chef who can instinctively adjust the seasoning of a dish without even measuring.
I love that image. It's about that level of mastery where the skill becomes an extension of ourselves, flowing effortlessly from our fingertips.
Exactly. It's the culmination of all those hours in practice, of those moments of struggle and triumph, of that deep immersion in the craft.
And the final strategy the book highlights, which I find both intriguing and challenging, is embracing slowness. In a world that's constantly pushing us to do more faster, this idea of slowing down feels almost radical.
It is. The book argues that true mastery takes time. It's about resisting the urge to rush the creative process, to let ideas simmer and evolve organically.
That's a tough one for me, I'll admit. I tend to be impatient. I want to see results quickly. But I'm starting to see the wisdom in this approach. It's about trusting the process, allowing space for those aha moments to emerge, and not forcing things before they're ready.
Exactly. It's about surrendering to the natural rhythms of creation, recognizing that sometimes the most profound insights come when we least expect them.
Wow, this has been an incredible deep dive. So many fascinating insights about mastery, from those initial sparks of interest to the challenges of social intelligence and the cultivation of higher level intuition. It's really given me a lot to think about, and I hope it's done the same for you, our listeners. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep striving for mastery.